What are we here for? Why are we living this life? What happens to us when we die? They investigated that mystery more deeply than any other culture. They were doing so right from the beginning of records. We're here to discuss what is known as the path of souls and where they lead. The mystery of death and what comes after is one of humanity's oldest and most perplexing questions, one that every culture has grappled with in its own way. There's an ancient Egyptian notion of a leap to the sky after death, to the Milky Way, a journey along the Milky Way of encountering challenges and dangers and risks. That idea is found all over the world. The path of souls is found all over the Americas. Could it be that these civilizations, separated by oceans and millennia, were all tapping into the same primordial understanding of the soul's transition? I think, first of all, it's evidence of a remote common origin of this idea. It's what it's found amongst cultures all around the world that's apparently had no contact with one another and are often separated by hundreds or thousands of years. The same idea is found about what happens to us after death. What Graham is alluding to is this remote common source that is responsible for giving these distant cultures the same idea about the afterlife. But how? These spiritual ideas are found all around the world. They involve the journey of the soul after death and a leap to the heavens. And sometimes it's called an underworld, but really it's set in the sky. And this journey that takes place where you are judged on what you've done with your life. This recurring theme of the soul navigating an exploratory path after death, whether through gates, underworlds, or starry skies, suggests a shared, ancient memory. This is something else that we avoid in the world today, is taking responsibility for our own lives. The ancient Egyptians required you to take responsibility for your life, and if you did not do so, the outcome after death would not be good. The concept of taking responsibility for one's life before death is a central tenet of Egyptian spirituality. They believed that how you lived your life determined your fate in the afterlife. The heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth, and only those who had lived justly could pass. The judgment wasn't just about avoiding punishment. It was about whether you'd taken the precious gift of life and done something meaningful with it. You had to celebrate the gift of life. You had to realize the incredible gift that you had been given. And one of the opportunities of that gift is the opportunity to accumulate wisdom. And yet, isn't this the ultimate question for us all? What did we do with the gift of human life? The fact that we are conscious beings with the ability to love, to hate, to create, and to destroy, isn't that in itself a cosmic mystery? But in the case of ancient Egypt, that idea is developed over 3,000 years, and it's essentially the same at the beginning as it is at the end. And that is, that death is not the end. We are yet to have an accurate modern explanation as to what consciousness is. Is it tethered to our physical bodies? Or are we, as some suggest, merely tuning into a greater field of universal awareness? That death is not the end. This is the conclusion of a society that put its best minds at work for 3,000 years on this problem. That death is not the end. We can explain the mechanics of brain function, but not the essence of what it means to be aware, to experience, to live. But when a scientist says death is the end, there's nothing more, we're just physical bodies, and when the light goes out, it goes out forever. That's actually not a scientific fact. As the conversation continues, it's reiterated that the notion that death is the end is not something science has actually proven. It's more of an assumption, a convenient framework that allows us to avoid dealing with the uncomfortable idea that we might be held accountable for how we lived our lives. I mean, suppose death just is the end, then that's a way not to have to take too much responsibility for our lives, for the impact we've had on others, for the pain we may have caused, or for the joy we may have caused. If there's nothing after death, then why bother being a moral or ethical person? But the Egyptians, and many other ancient cultures, believed deeply in the moral responsibility of life. They believed we were here for a purpose, and part of that purpose was to evolve spiritually, to grow in wisdom, and to leave the world better than we found it. You have been given the precious gift of life. What did you do with it? There are moral aspects to that question. These 42 assessors, they called the negative assessors, who asked the soul of the deceased questions about what they did in life, and those are all moral questions. And allegedly, these questions bear some relationship to the 10 Commandments. But then there is another question, a concept known as the weighing of words, and That question is, what did you do with the gift we gave you? We gave you the gift of a human life. We gave you the gift of the opportunity to love or to hate, your choice. This is the weighing of words. At the heart of this belief is the idea that after death, one's soul is subjected to a judgment process that determines whether it is worthy of continuing its journey into the afterlife. It's not just about how much good or bad one has done, but more about whether the individual lived truthfully, authentically, and in alignment with divine order. We gave you the gift to live in a human body, to have this incredible consciousness, to be able to integrate all kinds of information from all kinds of spheres. What did you do with it? The weighing of words also addresses the ancient Egyptian belief in living in truth. Ma'at wasn't just about cosmic balance. She was about living with integrity, with an honest heart, and using speech responsibly. So, when they ask, what did you do with the gift of life? It's not merely a tally of actions, but also an examination of whether you spoke with authenticity, upheld truth, and maintained harmony with the universe. Certain souls do not go on. Their journey ends. And it ends because of the choices they made during life, and because they never took responsibility for what they did. What's chilling and beautiful about this belief is its emphasis on accountability. The Egyptians didn't believe in a free pass to the afterlife. It wasn't enough to simply exist and hope for eternal paradise. Your life had to be an expression of divine balance and moral righteousness. They took personal responsibility incredibly seriously, and if you failed in that regard, if you intentionally harmed others, lived deceitfully, or ignored the gift of life, you were cut off from the cosmic cycle. Your soul's journey was over. Well, it kind of makes sense. The natural selection of souls. Modern society, in contrast, has pivoted so sharply into the material realm. We've become obsessed with ownership, production, and consumption. So much so that we often define ourselves by what we accumulate rather than what we experience or contribute. Yet, if death is the ultimate equalizer, rendering all of our possessions meaningless, doesn't that beg the question of why we spend so much energy on them? Our ancient ancestors might say that we've become distracted from the true task at hand, accumulating wisdom, understanding, and taking responsibility for our lives. We are so focused on things where we define ourselves by our material possessions. Ancient Egypt had a totally different focus. Yeah, they were great at making material things, but their main thing was, what happens to us when we die? Ancient Egypt's fascination with the afterlife wasn't just spiritual tourism. It was an obsessive attempt to answer the most fundamental question: why are we here, and what happens when we die? They documented their beliefs meticulously through hieroglyphs, mythological journeys, and rituals that spoke to a cosmic cycle beyond the grave. Life wasn't only about accruing wealth or prestige, it was about preparing for something greater, a continuation that demanded spiritual readiness. They were documenting this journey to the afterlife in hieroglyphs. And what were you documenting? Like, how do you know? How did everyone agree on this particular myth or this story? It's perplexing to think that with all our technological advances, we still haven't cracked the mysteries the Egyptians were obsessed with. The nature of consciousness, the soul, and the meaning of life itself. The journey of the soul after death. For all our brilliance in science and technology, we still haven't quite figured out why we're here, or what happens when we die. Maybe, like the Egyptians, we need to reorient ourselves to the mysteries that transcend the material and touch the eternal.